I can look at you go.
Hey.
Share my screen. So, oh Lord. Okay. So I think this is loading. Okay. I just made this cute little thing a couple minutes ago, so there's moving parts to it. But welcome to the Master Gardener Society of Oakland County January meeting. I just have 3 notes for this meeting. I got the email today, and I'm sure many of you did as well, that the Master Gardener recertification process is open on VMS. So there are some great instructions there. And as soon as you do that and you get your confirmation email, you can send that over to Julie Bird and do your membership. So you can join us for another year. And I guess on that note, we'll be sending out our MGSOC application shortly. Third, I'm glad to be here and to be your new president. And then I just want to note, this is fun. Our next meeting is at our new spot, and it's on Valentine's Day. So Wednesday, the 14th of February. And our new meeting space is the Rochester Community House, adjacent to downtown Rochester. Same time and all that. So that's really all I have, not a ton. I'm going to turn it over to Amanda, unless any of our other board members have something they would like to share. Oh, Sally.
Make a quick announcement about
Please.
our Master Gardener Conference.
Yes.
Yep.
Love that.
We're going to be live again this year, thank goodness. And I'll just give you a couple quick updates here. The tickets are not on sale quite yet, but they should be in about a week. We're working on getting that up and running. But the date is Saturday, April 20th. So mark your calendar. We are once again at Oakland Schools Conference Center, Pontiac Lake Road in Waterford, where we've been forever, except when we were virtual. And it's going to be, there will be 5 continuing edit credit hours. And our speakers we are very excited about our speakers. We have Joseph Tykonovich is going to discuss soil problems and how to solve them. And Scott Bierlin is from the Cincinnati Zoo. And we watched some videos of him when we were trying to select speakers, and we just loved him. He has 2 topics. One is badass trees for piss poor places. We thought that was fun. And planting for pollinators. And then Deborah Trickett is going to do jaw-dropping, traffic stopping, get the neighbors talking containers. So because food prices have gone through the roof, our tickets are going to be a little bit more expensive this year. They will be $95, but we'll still have all the same things, vendors and box lunches. And anyway, mark your calendar and we'll have those tickets for sale very soon. Thank you.
That sounds amazing. I've seen 2 of those speakers live, and you guys were in for a treat.
Thank you.
Anybody else before I get started? All right, tonight we have with us Mr. Robert Miller. He's from the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. He'll be speaking on the spotted lanternfly today, and that is a pest that is unfortunately coming our way. It was spotted in Oakland County, so it's something that we probably should be getting up to date on. As a reminder, and being that we haven't done Zoom for a while, please make sure that you are muted and that your video is turned off during the presentation. We will be holding questions until the end. So as soon as you have a good question, hold on to it, and we'll take those at the end of his presentation. And without any further ado, I'll turn the presentation over to Mr. Miller, and we'll get started for tonight.
Thanks, Amanda. Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you all right. Is there anybody that's having problems? Just pipe up in the chat.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so as Amanda mentioned, we are going to talk about spotted lanternfly. Let me share my screen. and we'll get going in presentation mode here. All right. Okay. So I have, I think, around 50 slides, lots of images, but basically, you know, what we're going to cover here is sort of the basics of spotted lanternfly and why this is an issue, right? And why we need to be aware of it here in Michigan, right? So spotted lanternfly has been in this country for quite some time now, right? Since 2014. And it has moved quickly, kind of all over the place, right? Kind of went a little bit up and down the eastern seaboard and has moved out into the Midwest. I'll show you a map here in a couple slides. Most recent detection, I think, is probably Chicago, Illinois. But this is an invasive pest that moves quickly, right? Was brought into Pennsylvania probably on a load of stone from Asia. I don't know why they would bring stone from China to Pennsylvania. If you've been to Pennsylvania, they have plenty of stones there, but I suppose that's global trade for you, right? And spotted lanternfly is now spread to 13 states. That's probably actually 14 or 15. Every time I give this talk, it seems I have to update this. Now I'll go through the life cycle and, you know, approaches and the current infestation in Pontiac. But basically, you know, why we care about this pest is so for two reasons. One, this is going to be a public nuisance sort of invasive species, right? It's not so much going to be a particular problem for any one of the plants in your garden, unless you grow grapes. But it's going to be a public nuisance. In areas where we have seen high levels of infestation, they can basically get very numerous, and they like certain species of tree. Most prevalent is tree of heaven. You know, they really like tree of heaven. So you'll get certain tree of heaven that they really like to feed on. And the public basically kind of gets grossed out. They get concerned. They want to know what the heck all these bugs are doing all over maybe their maple, or that tree they have in their backyard that's they didn't even know was an invasive tree. To them, it's just a nice tree, right? Tree of heaven itself is invasive. It's been in the country for a long time. It loves crappy soils. It grows aggressively. If you try and cut it down and don't use herbicide, you'll just get more of it. Won't spend a lot of time on that. I'm sure most people here in this group know all about tree of heaven. You know, talking about that with tree of heaven here, we've got a slide basically on tree of heaven identification. 10 to 40 leaflets in this compound leaf. They're going to have these knobs at the base of the leaflet here. That's sort of the easiest way to tell it apart from a sumac, for example. They have a rotten peanut butter or a peanut butter odor when they're crushed up. And then also the pith on the stem is chambered. You slice it open with a knife. It's got little sort of empty spaces in there. And then also the bark on it kind of has a kind of greenish texture or sorry, greenish color that you can observe. But this group probably can identify tree of heaven, so we won't spend any more time on it. Now back to spotted lanternfly. What we're looking at here is, this is actually an outdated map of the infestation. Like I said, the most recent detection is probably Chicago, Illinois. Spotted lanternfly does love to move along rail lines. So basically what we've seen is a first infestation in Ohio, which was there in Eastern Ohio, was actually brought in on train loads of trash from, I believe it was New Jersey. So spotted lanternfly loves to move on rail. And then from there, it was found in a couple other locations in Ohio, and then in Indiana, and then in Chicago, Illinois. Basically, Michigan found its first detection after Ohio. So it went Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, right? We have one detection, one infested site here in Pontiac. I'll talk all about that later. But these blue counties are counties that are confirmed to have infestations of spotted lanternfly. These little purple dots that we see, if you've got decent resolution on your screen, that's where individual spotted lanternfly have been found with no populations being detected. All right, so let's talk a little bit about life cycle and identification, right? So with spotted lanternfly, we have one life cycle per year, okay? They start off as egg masses. Right now, the only spotted lanternfly that are out and about are egg masses that are laid on the trunks of trees. And we'll take a look at some photos of egg masses in a bit. Those eggs hatch in spring to sort of early summer. and they go through a number of life stages or instars, right? So their first 3 instars are black with little white spots, right? They don't look like the adult that you might recognize from outreach material or the billboards that we put up. It's only when they hit the 4th instar do they pick up this red coloration. And then we have the adults that have that, we call that showy, a very showy wing, very easily recognizable sort of polka dots in the front and sort of a thumbprint or brick pattern on the hind wing there, on the back of the wing. And then they lay eggs starting in September, running into November. You know, we're not going to find them laying eggs in December here. Down in North Carolina, you might, but we'll get eggs starting basically early September, ending in November. So basically for that month. And then they overwinter as the egg mass, right? So here are some images of spotted lanternfly, the life cycles themselves. Starting at A through E, we see the egg mass there in A. Egg masses are basically going to be about 1 inch to 1.25 inches, maybe. When they're first laid, they look like kind of wet putty. And then as they go through the season, they sort of dry up and crack a little bit, and they look like dried mud. And they hatch, and we get this first 3 instars that have the black with the white spots, and they take on the red coloration, right? So all of the outreach material that you might see on like a billboard or, you know, the images that local media is going to use, you know, 2, 4, and 7, they're going to just use images of the adults. But they spend, you know, part of their lives as, you know, these earlier instars that, you know, if folks see that, they may not think spotted lanternfly. So spotted lanternfly also like to group together. They can be found in groups. They're not necessarily a social insect like we would think of bees or wasps or ants, but they like to group together. I don't know if that is fully understood. There's currently lots of research that's going on right now with spotted lanternfly. But, you know, the images that we see, we'll see them grouped together. And that's one of the things the public doesn't like. There's all of this strange insect on their tree in their backyard, and there's a whole bunch of them there, and they're feeding, and they're making a mess while they feed. Here's a 4th instar starting to take on that red coloration. I don't think you'll ever see this out in the wild, but this is just kind of a cool image of basically a nymph molting into an adult. So it's going from that final juvenile instar onto the adult form. And then here we have pretty much a close-up shot of an adult, and that would be on a tree of heaven. You can see those little lobes at the base of the leaf right there. That's tree of heaven. That's its favorite host, right? So here we have adult spotted lanternfly on a maple. And this is what I'm talking about when I say that this is a public nuisance pest, right? Everything that we know about spotted lanternfly in North America is that it is a stressor, a plant stressor for trees, right? So it'll feed on this maple tree. It'll be there for a little while, and then they'll move off. They'll find something else to feed on, right? It'll stress the tree, but we don't see a lot of mortality of maples or black walnuts or birches or any of these other things that they like to feed on, because spotted lanternfly will feed on over 100 different species of plants. So it's not just 1 or 2, right? But they'll feed on, you know, this, and they'll move off and they'll go feed on something else, right? But while they're feeding, right, while they're on there, while they're on your tree in your backyard, you're gonna see that as a citizen, and you're gonna go, holy moly, what the heck is that? We got to call somebody and we got to get this figured out. That's not going to kill the tree. There may be a potential that they can vector some disease, but again, we're not seeing a lot of tree mortality. It's a little bit different story for grapes, but I don't have a whole lot of information for on grapes in this presentation here, but we'll mention it a little tangentially, and I'll show you a video actually a little bit later. Just for fun here, a little bit about the biology, just male and female. You know, they look pretty much almost identical. You know, we got the male here on the left, female on the right. Basically, you can see the ovipositor on the female. Ovipositor is what the insect uses to actually lay the eggs on the tree. And they've got a little red part at the end. You can tell if it's male or female. And then this one here is getting ready to lay her eggs, and she's all swollen and fat and yellow, right? So it's kind of a difference. Sort of late in the season, we can pick them up and we can look at them and go, oh, it's a male or a female. Doesn't really make any difference other than that. Just sort of a nice, interesting image. All right, so egg masses. Let's talk about this. So this, you know, It's an invasive species. How's it being moved around, right? How's it getting moved around the country? Mostly by egg masses, right? So spotted lanternfly lays its eggs on a rail car, on a pallet, on a pot at a nursery grower out in New Jersey, on the trunk of a tree. That is then in New Jersey on the trunk of a tree, and that tree is then put on a truck and brought to Michigan. And voila, you have an infestation in Pontiac. And that's what happened. We got basically nursery stock from New Jersey that had egg masses laid on it that were brought into Michigan. The egg masses hatched here in Michigan in sort of that spring to early summer time period. And now, of course, we have an infestation, right? So, like I've mentioned before, these are laid in the fall, they overwinter, and they hatch in the spring. And in Pennsylvania, they're seeing, and in other states as well, I haven't heard anybody report anything differently, basically 35 to 40, you might hear 45 eggs per egg mass. And a female will lay, on average, 2 egg masses, right? So it's 2 egg masses with 35 to 40 eggs in it. Now, eggs are often sort of laid, on trees or on other sort of vertically oriented stuff out in the fields. It could be fence posts, pieces of concrete, old pieces of wood leaning up against the side of the garage. They do like to lay their egg masses together, right? So you'll see multiple egg masses next to each other. And we have 2 images here. One is an egg mass on a piece of, I believe that's like a fence post that you would put up temporary fencing with, or trellis for grapevines. And the other one there is just the trunk of a tree. Here in Michigan, in the Pontiac site, we actually found the most egg masses basically on branches that were coming out from the main stem of the tree, where, the branch is mostly, it's not vertical, it's sort of mostly horizontal in some angle. And they were laying on the underside of sort of a horizontal branch is where we were finding the most egg masses at our site. And I'll tell you what, these are difficult to spot. They're mostly this sort of tan. They can be anything from white to tan to gray, depends on what they've been feeding on. Mostly they're the colors that we see here, this sort of brownish gray color, and they blend right in with the tree bark, right? We have found at our Pontiac site that if it's been raining and the tree trunk is wet, sometimes we get a little bit different contrast and you can see the egg masses a little bit more. And just like spongy moth, which we used to call gypsy moth, just like spongy moth, you can scrape those egg masses, you can crush the eggs, you can scrape the egg masses into a bucket of soapy water, right? Some states are even spraying egg masses with golden pest spray oil. You need to get really good coverage to be able to suffocate that egg, right? Those egg masses, that's sort of a mechanical, just suffocation, right? If you're using this golden pest spray oil. But so far here at our one site in Pontiac, we've just been scraping egg masses with putty knives. Just some images here of egg masses on, light bulbs and camping chairs and outdoor cushions, the sort of stuff people might have around their houses, the underside of a planter box, right? So you can see how this might get moved around, This stuff gets picked up for whatever reason and moved across the country, and all of a sudden you might have spotted lanternfly in a new location. And that's certainly what happened in Pontiac. And we get some calls from time to time. People, confuse these spotted lanternfly egg masses with other things, and that's understandable. Mostly spongy moth is what we get. I get calls from up north where they have more spongy moth. And the thing I tell folks is that spongy moth is going to be fuzzy, and spotted lanternfly is going to look like putty or dried mud. All right, so feeding damage. So spotted lanternfly, they don't have chewing mouth parts. They've just got basically a long needle or straw, kind of like a mosquito, but they have a piercing, sucking mouth part, right? So they put this piercing, sucking mouth part into the tree, and they basically extract sugary liquid from the tree, sap, right? From whatever it is they're feeding on, plant sap, right? And they're actually relying on the turgor pressure of the plant. Turgor pressure is basically the internal pressure in the plant. If you haven't watered your plants in a while and they get all wilty, that's because they have a low turgor pressure because they don't have enough water, right? You water them and they plump back up and the leaves get fully expanded. Well, that's one with proper turgor pressure. Well, they're relying on the internal pressure of the plant to just push the fluid through them. Right? There's that piercing, sucking mouth part again. This absolutely no harm to humans or pets of any kind, right? They can't bite you, sting you, nothing like that. They feed on plants. Now, one of the things that we need to discuss is what happens when they feed on plants. I want to go back here for a second. See this red arrow? I want you to watch this individual spotted lanternfly right here. We've got spotted lanternfly feeding on grapes. They really like grapes, right? Grape growers are, and university extension departments across the country are working on methods for grape growers to deal with spotted lanternfly. One of the major challenges is that spotted lanternfly really starts to show up in vineyards right about the time you want to be harvesting your grapes. So you can make a chemical application of, using any of the standard insecticides that you might use on your grapes. However, there's an interval. If you spray the grapes with, various types of insecticides, you have to wait a certain period of time before you can harvest. Well, they'll spray, they'll get a good kill from the insecticides because there are many insecticides that are very effective against spotted lanternfly. They're not tough in that regard. They're just numerous. But you get a good kill, you need to wait 2 weeks. Well, after a few days, they're back again, right? You killed a bunch, those are dead, they're gone, but more just came in from the wood line, right? Because there'll be so many of them. But that aside, let's talk about what happens when they feed. So we've got our eye on that particular insect there. They're feeding, right? And spotted lanternfly is a high throughput feeder. You'll see this insect eject little drops of liquid as it's feeding, right? And you'll start to see there it goes, little drops of liquid coming out the back end of that insect, right? And that's not on repeat or anything like that. That's all those little drops came out of that one bug. Now, if you think about it, what's going on with that honeydew? That's called honeydew. You've probably seen that from other piercing, sucking insects, maybe in your garden, right? Maybe you've got a tree or other plants that have aphids on them, and you'll see a little bit of sooty mold or other insects that are doing that. Well, if you have a whole bunch of spotted lanternfly and they're feeding, they can make a whole bunch of sooty mold. People really don't like that, especially when it covers their back porch. And here's a picture of the first step has been power washed. The second step hasn't. I can guarantee you that is sticky, that smells bad, that attracts flies, that attracts yellow jackets. It's attracting those secondary pests and it's fouling everything, right? You don't want to park your car underneath that tree. Now, this image that I have here, this is the worst case scenario. This is the one that, would get picked up and used by the nightly news because they want the worst image they can possibly find. What we're looking at here, this is a rare case, right? This is called a hot tree. So this is probably a tree of heaven that for some reason, this tree of heaven gives off a chemical signature that the spotted lanternfly really, really like. And they go to this tree and they feed on this tree heavily and they stay there. And as they're feeding, they're ejecting honeydew. The honeydew is a sugary liquid. It gets colonized by black sooty mold, which is actually a fungus, but people call it black sooty mold. And then you get this mess underneath it, right? This is not going to be your average situation. This is the worst of the worst, but this is sort of what can happen. That picture gets picked up by 2, 4, and 7, and all of a sudden the phones are ringing off the hook next day for our group, right? So, as I mentioned before, damage to plants for spotted lanternfly, a plant stressor, right? It's not killing these trees outright, but it's feeding on them, causing some damage, mostly with the sooty mold smothering leaves. It's getting on stuff underneath the trees. Maybe it's a playhouse, maybe it's a car, maybe it's a deck, maybe it's somebody's house itself. And that's when people get upset, right? So here we have a tree that is covered in spotted lanternfly. If you lean in, you might actually be able to see the individual insects there on that tree, right? This is the sort of thing people don't like, right? And you'll get that from time to time, right? That may not be all season. They'll move off, right? I mean, you can find images of, for example, spotted lanternfly feeding on apple trees. Apple growers get all upset when they see that. Oh, no, it's another pest I have to deal with. Well, I had one of the people from Pennsylvania who actually took that picture say, yeah, I took that picture. They were gone the next day. They showed up, they fed, and they left. I mean, they can fly, right? They don't fly very far. They're not very good flyers, but they can fly. All right, so what they'll feed on, a sort of time of year chart. This isn't exact, but if you're looking for it in your yard or in your area, these are maybe the times that you might want to look. You'll notice that, tree of heaven and grape is all year long, right? I don't know, you might talk to some people and this might be updated, or folks might not agree with this in various regions based on what they've seen. With this kind of pest, we talk to folks in other places and they'll say, oh, we've observed X, X, Y, and Z. And other people will say, well, we haven't seen that in our region yet. This is a relatively new problem, right? And your climate, your soils, your mix of vegetation across the landscape, how big a problem spotted lanternfly is going to be in Southeast Michigan, Southwest Michigan, up north. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you exactly, right? There's a bunch of different factors between climate, soil types, how much tree of heaven there is, other host material, that I can't say exactly what it's going to look like for Michigan. Is it going to be as bad as some places have had in Pennsylvania? Don't know yet, right? Damage to other crops to date, we're not seeing damage reported of any other agricultural commodity except grape. It's not an issue for soybeans or corn or cotton down south, anything like that. There's some research that says that maybe they like cucumbers. Well, I don't know if you know this, but the thumb here in Michigan actually is the largest producer of cucumbers for pickling in North America. I thought that was kind of cool. I didn't know that. But is this going to be an issue for cucumber growers? Don't know. I wouldn't bet that it would be, but again, that's one of those things that as this develops, we might find out that it is, right? And, folks will respond accordingly. They'll figure out how to manage it. So management basically from, you kind of have to think of this on a couple levels. Like, what are you doing statewide? And then what are people doing in their backyards? What are grape growers doing? I'm just talking generally here about statewide, right? And then what, some advice that we'll give, general advice to homeowners. Basically, the first message is stop the spread. If you're removing stuff, if you're picking up a load of plants from Pennsylvania at some garden show or something, check those things for egg masses, right? Especially if it's late in the summer for some reason, right? Scrape and smash egg masses, if and when this infestation moves to your area. You can use sticky traps on trees, just like folks would for spongy moth. Remove tree of heaven. I think that's a pretty good idea. I mean, it's an invasive tree anyway. If I had the tree of heaven in my backyard and I didn't live far from the infestation in Pontiac, I would be thinking about getting rid of that tree of heaven, right? And that means cutting the tree down and applying herbicide to the stump, triclopyr or glyphosate. Tree of heaven is aggressive. You can't just cut it down and think that you're fine. It's not a blue spruce, right? And then applying insecticides. There are many insecticides that are quite useful against spotted lanternfly. They're not very tough in that regard at all, right? So, I mean, there's stuff at the local garden center you'll be able to get your hands on. Again, stopping the spread, don't move firewood. That's standard message sort of for all invasive species. Check your gear. Don't park under infested trees, windows rolled up, right? That's if you were in an area where you have, a known infestation. Removing egg masses, again, just like spongy moth, scrape it into bucket of soapy water, scrape it into a bucket with some rubbing alcohol in there, smash them with a hard flat surface. That's what we were doing. We were just using cheap plastic putty knives from Home Depot and just crushing them, right? Sticky bands. So spotted lanternfly like to go up and down the tree sort of as they feed. It's one of the things that they do, right? They like to move around a little bit. And if you use a sticky band on a tree that they seem to really like to feed on, you can catch a lot and you can kill a lot, right? Every female you kill is one less egg mass. Remember, an egg mass has between 35 and 40 eggs in it. All right, we've already looked at that. So Oakland County, all right, we covered a little bit about tree of heaven, right? And I'm going to take some time here and actually run through what happened in Oakland County and how spotted lanternfly basically showed up in Oakland County, right? We'll move quick. We don't need to dwell on the details here. But, you know, this image was taken on 7/21/22 and was reported to us on 8/5/22, right? So that's August 5th. And somebody at a nursery in Pontiac said, hey, what's this bug? Well, I've seen a couple of them in our nursery. With further investigation, we found out, yep, basically you have a scenario where infested nursery stock from New Jersey was put on a truck, brought to Michigan to be sold in Michigan at a retailer in Pontiac. Now, you know, some of you might be thinking like, well, I've certainly bought some stock this year. Unless you bought an ornamental tree that was 35 feet tall, I think you're fine. So the company that brought this in, I'm not going to name their name. That's sort of our standard policy, is we don't name names. But they really specialized in moving in high value stock from the East Coast, or mostly from the East Coast, maybe from some other sources. But I'm talking about stuff you would need construction equipment to move. You know, beech trees that were literally 30 feet tall, right? In these huge burlap balls, right? Not the kind of stuff you see at Lowe's and Home Depot, right? So we've got our infestation there in Pontiac. Show you some aerial images here. So, you know, on August 9th, we went and conducted a survey, basically broke the area up into grids. This is right near where the Silverdome used to be. In fact, our map still says Silverdome on it, right? But there's a wastewater treatment plant in the area. And we found the infestation of spotted lanternfly right on the fence, right near the fence line, with that wastewater treatment plant, with that nursery retailer right over there, sort of sharing the property, right? And it was pretty obvious that, yeah, that's how it came in. We looked in the surrounding area and only found spotted lanternfly right at that wastewater treatment plant, right at that facility area, right? And that land is all owned by the county, lucky for us, right? We also looked at tree of heaven in the area. All the green boxes are tree of heaven. It's an invasive tree, right? And the only positives we found are the red boxes, again, right near the wastewater treatment plant. So we have spotted lanternfly kind of on the western half of this 54-acre site, right? And right where that red pin is where the infestation is. And this is at the corner of Featherstone and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, right off of 59 there. Now, there are two nursery retailers at this site, right? There's site one. We didn't find any spotted lanternfly at site one, and then the other nursery retailer. You probably know what it is, but it was the other nursery retailer that brought in basically infested stock. All right. We didn't, you know, we've looked a few times now around the area, and we still don't find anything, don't find any spotted lanternfly moving off that site specifically, right? We've done some chemical treatments at the site that I'll talk about, and egg mass scraping, I'll talk about that as well, to keep that population low, to keep it moving off the site. Now, here is where we have actually detected spotted lanternfly on that site, right? So again, you're still on that, you know, 55-acre property there, with the concentration towards the northwest corner, but again, still not moving off the site. Okay, so treatments. So what do you do to try and kill as many spotted lanternfly as possible? You know, when we talk about invasive species, you know, one of the things that I like to say is that we're going for suppression here. I don't like to use the E word too much because it sets up false expectations. The E word is eradication. Eradication is extremely difficult, right? You're talking about a 60-acre area where these insects are constantly moving. They crawl around, they can fly. They're not very strong flyers, but they can fly. They can move off the site, they can move on the site. They don't pay attention to boundary lines, right? But what we can do is we can use trap trees. So a trap tree is a tree of heaven that we have treated with this systemic insecticide. We like to use either dinoteffuron or imidacloprid, right? We've treated those trees out there with both imidacloprid and dimetepfuron. In 2022, they got imidacloprid and dimetepfuron. In 2023, we were, since we knew the site and we were familiar with it from 2022, we were able to apply dimetepfuron at just the right time, right? So these applications of dimetepfuron are targeted to tree of heaven only. And they're either done as an injection or basal bark spray. In this case, it's basal bark spray. These little red plastic injector points that we see on this tree of heaven here, that was from an imidacloprid treatment, right? This year they received just dimetepfuron, right? Smaller trees were treated with triclopyr because we wanted to just have tree of heaven at the site, just have those that we were treating with insecticide left behind, all the rest sort of cut and removed from the site, right? We've mapped all this in our mapping layer that we use to keep track of everything. And we are going to continue our management efforts at that site to really suppress that population. Now, last February, we went and we scraped egg masses. We had people crawling all over that site, and that's very low tech. That is getting somebody to come out there with us, look, up and down the tree on all sides, look for the egg mass, look for this little light gray blotch on a dark gray bark. And then once you find it, scrape it off and crush it, right? We found quite a bit of egg masses. These blue dots here don't represent everything, but we found around 470 egg masses last year. And if you've got between 35 and 40 eggs per egg mass, that's around 20,000 insects that we were able to kill and get rid of, right? That we've got the blue diamonds here and the red yeses, those match pretty closely where we have seen spotted lanternfly at the site. All right. So moving forward, we're going to monitor treatment effectiveness, continue to treat the site. We're going to do outreach. We've talked to everybody, every property owner around that parcel of land, giving them information on spotted lanternfly, how not to move it off the site, right? And just what to be aware of. Even that enormous Amazon facility there, I was actually able to get inside and talk to their facility managers, right, about what they can do and what they can be aware of. They're nice folks. They worked with us. Come next season, this spring, summer, fall, I want to work with them to get some information to them and their drivers so that they're not moving spotted lanternfly around unintentionally. So we're going to continue to manage things at that site, keep that population suppressed, because in other regions, we have found that when you don't suppress a population and you let the population density build and build and build, they'll have these dispersal events where they just sort of take off from there. And right now, we're just trying to keep them at that site, keep them contained. So with that, we can open it up to questions.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and fire away. You can also use a chat too if you want to just send over a chat and I'll say
Hi,
that.
Rob. My name is Julie. How large are those bugs? Because they look like they're quite large. So once they've hatched, they look like they'd be easy to spot.
They are easy to spot. They're very distinctive. Anywhere from about a little under an inch to an inch and a quarter is what I'd say. Usually probably around an inch, right? But that's fairly big for an insect, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Rob, if we find these at other sites, are we supposed to report them to MDARD?
Yeah, you can report them. Basically, you can go to michigan.gov/spotted lanternfly. And that's going to have everything you need to know about how to report spotted lanternfly. I can even pull up that webpage if we like.
And so the only place that we've seen them is Pontiac?
That's right. The only place
Okay.
that we've seen them is in Pontiac. So I can share my screen again. Screen. Yeah, but we have a spotted lanternfly webpage. where it even has report spotted lanternfly and how you're going to report it. And then also information on it, what to look for, right? Life cycle photos, lookalikes, information on its habitat, range and control, various identification, right? And then there's some videos on, what it looks like and things like that that you can watch. That video would be Anthony Langelis, which is a member of our field staff. We won't watch that now. I mean, you can watch that on your own time. But fact sheets, videos, media files, right? Everything you need to know on spotted lanternfly there.
Is that on the
And-
Michigan website? Michigan, what website is that?
So that's going to be michigan.gov/spotted lanternfly. They
Okay.
call that the vanity link, right? That'll take you there.
And then we got a
Looks
couple
like-
questions. Go ahead.
Oh, looks like there's a question in the chat from Caitlin Slosky, our educator in Oakland County, and she says, "Have you seen any reports of egg masses being laid on trucks?"
Yes. So spotted lanternfly I don't think I mentioned this yet. They like sort of a rough or pitted surface to lay their eggs on. Anything from tree bark to rusted metal. You think of like maybe a piece of construction equipment, or even rail cars, rolling stock. They'll be made out of this real high quality steel that once it rusts, it just takes on this, that rusty color, and it gets kind of sandpaper rough, right? Not like a car, where a car just kind of rusts away and falls, because that metal's so thin. They really like that rough, sort of rusted metal to lay their eggs on. It's the right color, it's the right texture. So yeah, you can find egg masses on sort of the undersides on some of those, truck trailers or truck tractors. You'll find egg masses there.
We also had another question in the chat about the site in Pontiac. Were they only being found on Tree of Heaven there, or were they being found on other plants as well?
So when we conducted our survey, we looked all around and we didn't find anything in the area until we looked at that Tree of Heaven right there. It was basically on the wastewater treatment plant property. We found it right on that group of Tree of Heaven. We have since found it on other species, but if you're looking for it in your area, I would say don't waste your time. Just find the Tree of Heaven and go look. When we do some of these other survey activities that we do, we go to Tree of Heaven and we look specifically at Tree of Heaven.
You also had mentioned in your presentation about a quarantine zone, like as far as moving things around in the quarantine zone. For us in Oakland
Right.
County, is the quarantine zone just that 54-acre parcel that you showed us, or is that bigger than that?
Well, in the state of Michigan, we are not right now enacting a quarantine, right? Because, for example, in Pennsylvania, they have a quarantine that involves basically the movement of anything that spotted lanternfly could lay eggs on, which basically means a quarantine of everything. Like if you wanted to have a literal interpretation of their quarantine standards, the movement of anything out of a regulated county could be quarantined. I mean, and it talks about, any kind of goods that would be put on a truck. So basically any trucking company in Pennsylvania has to go through the spotted lanternfly compliance program. And unfortunately, you're still seeing spotted lanternfly spread all over the place. And that is a multi-million-dollar program, right? What we've done here in the state is we have compliance agreements with nursery retailers, which basically means that they have a number of stipulations that they have to meet to be able to sell nursery stock, right? And so there are two types of compliance agreement. One type is basically a compliance agreement for nurseries within infested areas and nurseries that are near infested areas. And those are basically levels of severity within the stipulations, right?
We had another question in the chat
Yep.
too. Is there any evidence that they need a water source close by? Or are they-
No. So they're picking up their fluids from the sap of the tree that they're feeding on, or the plant that they're feeding on. So we don't see them, not like bees. Well, sometimes you'll see bees, kind of at like somebody's bird feeder or something like that. It's not like that. They seem to get all their fluids from whatever it is they're feeding on.
And aside from scraping the egg masses, is there anything else that we can do if we see them, or anything we can do to prevent them encourage a predator? Is there any predators for them?
There's research ongoing right now at USDA related to biological control. And there are a number of biological control parasitic wasps. I think you've got one in the genus Spathius and another one like Tetrasticus or something like that. That might be emerald ash borer. I might be confusing it. But basically, there are some species of biological control predators that they're assessing. But that work is still very much ongoing, and I wouldn't expect any solutions from that for quite a few years now. That work takes a very long time because you want to avoid these unintended consequences. And I can't speak on that specifically there. It's just there are, for example, researchers at USDA working with researchers at Penn State that are working on that issue of biological control. And you know, you mentioned other things that you can do. If you got the tree of heaven in your backyard, get rid of it. If your neighbor has it, talk to them, tell them, you know, hey, listen, that's potentially going to become a problem, you know, with spotted lanternfly moving around. You might want to consider removing that tree and doing it properly so that you don't just get more tree of heaven. Keep in mind that this is something I fully expect to see other populations within the state of Michigan, right? We'll do everything we can to suppress that one population, but we can't stop everybody from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Carolina, Chicago, you know, Virginia, West Virginia, Maine. We can't stop them from bringing goods and things into the state of Michigan. Everything from, we've had other, okay, let's put it this way. We've had other reports of, like, for example, dead spotted lanternfly being detected at like businesses and retailers. And I'll just go through a list in my head where we get the reports, right? And you're only probably getting 20% of the stuff actually reported because the people know what to look for. The first report we ever got was on switch boxes, basically building material, the kind of thing that you put in the wall when you put a switch or an outlet in, a little electrical box. There was an electrical retailer that basically sold to contractors in Wyandotte, about a half mile from my sister's house. They were the first ones to report spotted lanternfly. There was dead spotted lanternfly found in boxes of tomato sauce in a Meijer on the west side of the state. A Walmart had dead spotted lanternfly on some little ornamental plants that were selling inside their store. There was a UPS facility that found some dead spotted lanternfly on some boxes in one of their warehouses. Another retailer that found dead spotted lanternfly underneath the plastic wrapping that was wrapped around pallets of soil. And they get into everything, right? And that's how they move around. So sooner or later, some egg masses get moved around that hatch, and then you get a little population. I'm pretty sure we have other populations in the state right now. We just don't know about it. So I guess what I'm getting at is right now, you know, our messaging to the public is be aware, report, slow the spread, right? Report it if you see it, because we need to know where they are. And eventually you sort of move into dealing with it. Safe use of, you know, insecticides, what to do if you have it, don't freak out, it's manageable, those sorts of things. And Michigan State University is working with our grape growers right now so that they know what to do. And other agricultural producers, because we have a whole lot of agricultural diversity here in the state. So Extension is working with apple growers and cherry growers and grape producers as well, so that they have answers on hand to deal with it if and when it does show up.
And like if we wanted an update on where the infestations are locally, where would we go for that?
So the best place is I'll pull it up right now because it's what I use, and it's sort of unofficially official. It's kind of funny. You would think that USDA would produce a nice map that we could all go to that would show us nationally where this issue is, but USDA won't do that. So let me think. It's lanternfly distribution. It's Cornell. So Cornell actually produces a map. This is the best map nationwide, and it's actually put together by Cornell College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, right? I'll share my screen. And they are going to show you basically the most up-to-date information about where spotted lanternfly is and isn't, right? And they've got this PDF that you can pull up. and it'll tell you when they last updated it, right? So this was last updated November 9th, right? So that reflects, I mentioned Chicago, there's the Chicago infestation. I think Tennessee wasn't on the map that we looked at because this is just moving so quickly. Every time I give a presentation, I didn't have time today. I'm actually technically not working today. My son's recovering from having his tonsils removed, but every time I give this presentation or a presentation like this, I have to go here and get a new screenshot, right? This is your best source. The counties in red here are counties that have quarantines. Some states are using counties quarantines, some states aren't. You can see that Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina, New York, and Maine and Rhode Island are not using quarantines, but like Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, they are using quarantines. Everybody's regulatory approach at the state level looks a little different, right? This is a very difficult thing to regulate for.
And
Other
also
questions?
we had a comment from Caitlin Splowski, our extension educator. She said that anybody who needs any more materials for handing out can come see her. She has the MDART and the MSUE handouts for anybody who wants to
Lots of
spread the word.
handouts, yep.
So, did anybody else
Thanks,
have any
David.
questions? Feel free to chime in either on chat or just unmute.
It was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Yes.
It's a, most of us live around the area of the infestation, or at least fairly close. So it's really important for us to know this information so that we can talk about it and share it and look for it. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
And
I just
last-
want to, I just
Go
want to take
ahead.
a moment to recognize you, Amanda, for putting our speakers together, starting with Rob this year. You do such a great job in running these Zooms. Thank you.
No problem.
That's right.
Well, I guess last call on any questions or any other comments anybody had to say. Otherwise, thank you again, Rob, and really appreciate the update on this information. It's kind of one of those scary monsters that we're all looking at now. Maybe it's not quite as scary as some of them, but
it's not, I wouldn't be afraid of it. It'll just be something that we'll have to manage eventually. And keep in mind, right, one takeaway point I want to impress on everybody right now is we're in a slow the spread mode, right? And you hear that a lot of times with other invasive species. What we're doing, what I do specifically, talk to people about slowing the spread because we're buying time for the researchers. That's what we're doing, right? We're buying times for all those really smart folks at USDA and, MSU Extension and at Penn State to figure out solutions that will work for this particular problem. So let's slow it down. Let's give the researchers time to work, and who knows what kind of tools we'll have in the toolbox going forward in the future where we can hopefully deal with this thing much more effectively.
right. Thank you again. And I guess that's it for the night, unless you have something to close with, Emily.
Nope, I just wanted to thank everyone who joined us tonight, and hopefully we'll see you in person on Valentine's Day. And I think it's totally an excuse for a sweet treat. So hopefully I'll be able to work with Kathy to get some signups going. I know I myself am going to bring conversation hearts because I just love to share those.
And I just want to remind people about membership. Sally did send out the membership applications. My internet keeps going in and out, but I think it was sometime last week, Sally. I don't remember the date. And just as a reminder, I don't have any ability to look at the Oakland County roster. So once you receive a letter from MSUE congratulating you on recertifying, could you either forward that email to my email address, which is jabird218@comcast.net, or make a copy and send it in with your application if you're mailing that in. And also, I am in the process of moving, so there is a new address on the application, so just be aware. Some people have been sending them to my house, which is fine, but I'm going to be out of here before the end of this month. So they will get lost in translation, basically, through the post office. So go with the address that's on the new application. And thank you for everybody who's going to do that in advance. It really, really helps.
Thanks, Julie, for all you do.
Well, thanks for get it out for everybody. I appreciate it. And thanks to all the board for their extra set of eyes to make sure all the information's correctly on the directory listing that it's attached to that email.
Thanks, Amanda. Great meeting. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Night, everybody.
I'm glad that bug was big, so we'll be able to spot it.
Yeah.
The sad thing is, it's kind of pretty, but nobody wants
Yeah.
it.
In
We
that
will be
certain
able to see
stage.
it. It's colorful.
All right, thank you, everybody. Happy New Year.
Julie, so
Yes.
I misspoke earlier. I think maybe in the flood of MGSOC emails, the membership one got lost, but should we send one out like maybe the third week of January, just trying to catch anyone who didn't see the first one? A reminder email about membership.
I'll let Sally know. She's
Okay.
already signed off, but we'll do that.
Yeah, I mean, I figure we can talk about it at the board meeting, but I just know for me personally, I always appreciate second and third emails because a lot of things get lost just in my head.
No, there's a lot of people that don't see them, believe me.
Yeah. Okay. And we can talk about other ways to reach people as well. Some of the other, like our choir uses Remind Me, the texting app. There are lots of ways we can try and reach more people. So
Well, that's good. We can talk with Sally Boley about that typically.
yeah.
She's communications. She tends to keep all those lists to send things out. So.
Okay, well, I am going to sign off. I'm so lucky. I'm at my best friend's mom's place here in
Oh, it's
Lansing because
beautiful.
I'm doing
love the
floral
background.
design. There, you can see on the counter just a few of the arrangements. We make like 6 a day. I don't know what to do with them. I'm going to take them to a random nursing home.
Oh, neat.
But I'm about to have some steak, and it's been cooking this whole meeting and smelling so good. So, all right,
Well, we'll
I'll see
see
you
you
guys
later.
later.